started out my last attempt at doing my video for today talking about how I enjoyed what Dan Bongino did, partially because he gives people a peek behind the curtain. Well, let me give you a peek behind the curtain. I've had problems recording certain parts of my podcast, and today was no exception. I literally had my microphone on mute, so I recorded an entire podcast without audio. So I'm redoing that podcast now. The second thing that I like about Mr. Bongino is that he does a lot in the realm of politics because of a fair amount of knowledge that he's picked up along the way. I liked that when I was younger. I hated politics, and then I began to realize just how much it affected my life, and that in part is what drove me to talk about the Senate and the House on today's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Wednesday, the 9th of March of 2022. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on my Facebook page, the Kurt's Religion and Politics page on Facebook, on Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com, my local page there, on minds.com, that would be the Kurt's Religion and Politics group as a rule, though you might see me elsewhere, on Parler, on Gab, on Twitter, or wherever else you happen to be picking me up today. Again, the subject for today is the Senate and the House, and I want to talk about this to try and clue some folks in on some things that I don't think they understand, and I kind of wish hadn't changed, and maybe we'll get some opportunity at some point to move back to where it was, but I'm going to go ahead and go through my notes. By the way, if you hear my son, you'll have to forgive me. This is his time doing his thing, and I try to put a buffer between us, but I only have so much space to do right now. I hope to make that better as time goes on, but I'm kind of stuck with what I've got for the moment, and it's on me. It's all on me. Okay, so getting into my notes. Why were there two houses, bicameral Congress in the United States? Why were senators appointed in the original design, appointed by the states? Was that some sort of mistake? Neither was by accident in my reckoning. Keep in mind, because culture changes, so do ideas about what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, and that's an important consideration, and I'll get into that a little more as we move on. Not too long ago, a group of people who will remain unnamed, you'll know who they are if you've been keeping up on things, was all in on the idea of defunding the police. Today, not so much. There are a lot of folks who start out at one extreme, progressive or conservative, and end up at the other, usually moving from more liberal to more conservative, but not always. Sometimes they go the other way, totally. Admittedly, sometimes it's about licking a finger and sticking it up in the air where less principled folks are concerned. That's a sad reality. Some folks are really willing to take whatever they can get and will use the way the wind is blowing to make that happen. It was for this reason, in my opinion, among others, that the U.S. Senate came to be. The Senate was to represent the states in Congress, where those in the House were about representing the people, the House of Representatives. It's a fact that culture can turn on a dime. Unlike many of the people, the states should have a more practical, more conservative viewpoint as a rule. This is why people assume things would, quote, cool down in, and I don't know if that's an exact quote, but it's good enough, the Senate as I see things. If you leave things, to the people, even in a representative government system, you'll be able to track how what happens matches shifts in cultural perspectives. Some might count that a good thing. For my part, that's not the case. What has made our country so successful is consistency as much as any other thing I can imagine. That's my opinion on it, for sure. I complain that speeders are a problem in the roadways, partially because there's not a single speed they all go. Now, you might be wondering what this has to do with anything, but let me continue, and I think you'll see. That means you have to be constantly on your guard and driving defensively, whether or not you're a speeder, whether or not you speed. that all-important consistency is not there when people break those speeding laws, or quite frankly, most any other laws, but particularly we're talking about the speeding laws. In my mind, this is why it's so sad we went from an appointed Senate to an elected one. The House was already representing the people. We didn't need another body to do likewise. I'm sorry, we just did not. I said in a previous video, I don't remember one or two back, in a previous podcast. I'm trying to say podcast these days because some people may get me on audio. I said in a previous podcast, not too far back, literally one or two back, maybe three at the very outside, I would think, that only one of the four branches, and I really kind of say that not jokingly and not tongue-in-cheek exactly, because you know it's only three, right? Executive, legislative, and judicial. But the executive I break into two for a very specific reason, and I'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, that only one of those was initially designed to be elected, and that was the House of Representatives. The judicial branch was typically nominees, right? They were nominated to positions. Some instances they're elected, but usually only for lower offices, and they're really not judicial offices. So in my state, we have a certain kind of quorum court judge, they're called, and their job is more executive than it is judicial as far as I can tell. And they get voted into office. But most judges, particularly on the federal level, are appointed. For the executive branch, it's mostly about appointment and hire-ins. That's mostly how that works. I break into a second one, which is the chief executive, because he is put in first by a popular election that's followed up intentionally by something that, quote, breaks that popular election, and that would be the slate of electors, right, the Electoral College. That's what that is. The Senate was initially designed, though this was changed quite some time back, to be appointed by state-level legislatures. And this is important to me. And it was literally done that way on purpose because the states have the people who run the states have a different idea about how things ought to be done than the people as a general thing, even the people of a particular state. Lots of times the people in a particular state don't have their finger on the pulse of the things that are making that state a good place to be and what really lots of people like about that state. And by the way, a lot of times what happens is you'll have urban areas that will vote for things that the suburban and rural areas really do not want, right? And this is an important consideration. This is one of the reasons that the states were the senators were about being elected by the states, being appointed by the states as opposed to election. As it is, if you look at the House of Representatives, as somebody recently said, and I'm sure it's been said 1,000 times before and will be said 1,000 times from this point on, maybe more, representatives should be wearing patches on their jackets to tell you who they represent, because it surely isn't the people who put them in office many times. They've got people who are paying for their runs and make it possible for them to do that, and a lot of times those people are not doing that for free. But part of the point of the Senate was to make it so that people didn't just, as a cultural thing, put people into power who were going to do things that were bad, like, for example, enact socialism. On a state level, most states do not agree with the idea of socialism, as far as I can tell. And the result is that when they appointed senators, the senators that they appointed would stop any socialist agendas. That's not true now because both houses are elected through popular election. And I consider that a very unfortunate thing. I could talk on this for quite some time, but I really need to get myself wrapped up for the day. So let me go ahead and do that. This has been the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Wednesday, the 9th of March of 2022. Most people consider that the middle of the work week. Tomorrow will be Thursday, the 10th of March of 2022. That means we're heading ever closer to that weekend. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloutHub, on my Facebook page. That's the Kurt's Religion and Politics page on Facebook, on kurtzreligionandpolitics.locals.com, on minds.com. The Kurt's Religion Politics group primarily there, on Parler, on Gab, on Twitter. Remember that you can dislike my comment. On Rumble, you can give me a rumble if you wish to do that. That is the boxing glove. You can leave comments on my content. By the way, you can do various kinds of like and dislike kinds of things, various places. I'm not going to get into all of that today. You probably know what's available if you're using a given platform. But you can comment on my content if you choose to do so. I will delete stuff that I think is trying to harm other people in some way or is advertisement with nothing to do with what I'm saying. Even if it makes me scratch my head, I'll probably leave it. If it's not one of those two things, I probably will try and vote up or vote down your comments if I can. Typically, it'll be an upvote, even if I don't understand them. So we'll try and do that. Today's subject has been the Senate and the House, and tomorrow I ask an interesting question, and the question is one word, and it is republic. And I want to get into this because of some conversations that I've had with individuals who really sort of make me question what people mean when they use that term. Hope you're doing well today. Hope everything is going well for you. And hopefully we will see you again on Thursday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was created on Wednesday, the 9th of March of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.